Pushpin disclaimer. This story is a fictional dramatization inspired by real emotional experiences. It explores mature themes including infidelity, emotional conflict, and betrayal. All characters and events are purely fictional, and any resemblance to real people or incidents is purely coincidental. This story is intended for mature audiences only. Reader discretion is advised. I never imagined that a simple weekend trip could start something that would unravel my life so completely. At that time, Ethan was just my brother-in-law, my husband Daniel's younger brother. We were close in the way families usually are. Polite, casual, occasionally playful. I never looked at him twice. Why would I? It started when Daniel had to cancel our trip to the family cabin at the last minute because of an emergency at work. We had been planning it for weeks, a break from the noise, a little peace in the woods, something I desperately needed. I was exhausted. My marriage had grown stale, my connection with Daniel felt like dust in the wind, and my emotions were buried under the daily routine of a lifeless relationship. Ethan offered to take me instead. He said he didn't want me to waste the weekend alone. It seemed harmless. After all, he was family. I told myself there was nothing wrong with accepting his offer. I even convinced Daniel, who didn't see any issue with it either. That maybe was my first mistake. The drive was surprisingly fun. Ethan and I talked more on that road trip than we had in years. About music, movies, our dreams, the kind of deep, winding conversations that pull you in without you even noticing. We laughed so much that my cheeks hurt. For the first time in months, I felt alive. Not because of Ethan, I told myself, but because I was simply away from everything else. When we arrived at the cabin, everything looked exactly the same as it had the last time we visited as a family. But something in the air felt different. Maybe it was the isolation, or maybe it was the fact that I was there without my husband. We unpacked, started a fire, and spent the evening on the porch watching the stars, sipping wine. It felt so normal, so harmless. But in between the laughter and shared stories, I started noticing little things. The way Ethan looked at me when I spoke. How he listened without interrupting. How his smile lingered just a second too long. I didn't know what it meant then, or maybe I didn't want to admit it. I chalked it up to the intimacy of the setting. I pushed the thought away. After all, I was a married woman, and he was my brother-in-law. But deep down, something stirred. A whisper of a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time being noticed. That night, as I lay in bed alone in the guest room, I couldn't sleep. I replayed our conversations, his laughter, the warmth of his presence. I told myself it was nothing. I was just tired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. Something small. Something dangerous. Something I wasn't ready to face. Not yet. The next morning started with sunlight pouring through the curtains and the smell of fresh coffee. I walked into the kitchen, still in my pajamas, and found Ethan making breakfast, pancakes, eggs, and bacon. He grinned when he saw me. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he joked. His voice was light, playful. It felt comfortable. I smiled back, brushing off the flutter in my stomach. "You cook too? That's impressive." We sat down to eat together, and it felt like the most normal thing in the world. But it wasn't. Not really. Because there was this tension now, subtle, unspoken, but undeniably present. It lived in the pauses between our sentences, in the way our eyes lingered a second too long, in the way my fingers grazed his when I reached for the syrup and neither of us pulled back. After breakfast, we decided to go for a hike along the lake. The trail was familiar. Daniel and I had walked it before, but with Ethan, it felt different. Lighter. Freer. We talked more than we hiked, and the conversations grew deeper. He asked me how I really felt about my life, my marriage, my dreams. And for some reason, I told him. I don't know when it happened, I confessed, sitting on a rock overlooking the water. But somewhere along the line, I stopped feeling wanted. I feel like a ghost in my own marriage. Ethan sat quietly, listening. Not interrupting, not trying to fix it, just listening. "I see you," he said after a long pause. "I always have." Those words hit harder than I expected. I looked at him, heart pounding. There was nothing inappropriate in his tone, yet everything about it felt dangerous. Back at the cabin, we spent the evening playing cards and listening to music. It was raining outside, soft and steady, tapping on the windows like it had something to say. Inside, the glow from the fireplace cast warm shadows across the room. At some point, our hands touched again, reaching for the same card. Neither of us moved. His fingers wrapped around mine slowly, deliberately. I froze. He looked at me with those dark, searching eyes. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled my hand back gently, stood up, and excused myself. "I'm tired," I lied. He nodded, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes. Or was it regret? Maybe both. In the guest room, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had opened a door I wasn't supposed to. I hadn't stepped through it yet, but I had turned the knob. And I wasn't sure if I could close it again. What scared me most was not Ethan's feelings for me. It was the realization that maybe, just maybe, I wanted him to feel that way. And that was the beginning of a truth I wasn't ready to admit. The rain didn't let up the next day. It came down in a soft, endless drizzle that turned the forest into a misty blur. The kind of day that makes you want to stay inside, wrapped in blankets, with nowhere to be and nothing to do. And that's exactly what we did. Ethan made hot chocolate that morning. He brought mine to the couch where I was curled up with a book and sat down next to me. Not too close, but close enough that I felt the warmth of his body beside mine. We didn't say much at first. Just silence, broken by the crackling fireplace and the rain tapping gently on the windows. Around noon, he put on some music, soft, slow, nostalgic. We played board games and shared snacks, laughing at stupid jokes. It was the kind of carefree joy I hadn't felt in years. Not forced. Not complicated. Just simple and real. But underneath it all, that tension from the night before pulsed like electricity between us. In the late afternoon, we ended up watching an old romantic movie. Halfway through, I noticed his arm resting casually behind me on the back of the couch. I knew I could shift away. I didn't. Instead, I leaned slightly toward him, letting my head rest lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move. Neither did I. And when he reached for my hand again, slowly, I let him take it. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was playing with fire. But it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like comfort. Something I had been starved of. The moment didn't escalate beyond that, just two hands intertwined under a shared blanket. But it was enough to shatter whatever boundary I had tried so hard to keep intact. Later, I went to the kitchen to prepare something for dinner, needing distance. I needed to breathe. I needed to remember who I was, who he was, and what this all meant. But even the silence of the cabin wasn't loud enough to drown the noise in my head. Ethan joined me and stood too close as we chopped vegetables side by side. His hand brushed my lower back. I didn't flinch. Instead, I looked up at him. And he looked back. For a moment, the world around us stopped. "I shouldn't be feeling this," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But we are." That night, I barely touched my food. My appetite had disappeared, replaced by an ache I couldn't explain. I lay in bed again, wrapped in guilt and longing, the lines between right and wrong now blurred beyond recognition. I hadn't cheated. Not technically. But something had shifted beyond repair. The real betrayal had already begun in my thoughts, in my heart, and in the way I started craving something I never should have. And I was beginning to wonder if there was still time to turn back. Or if I even wanted to. I don't know what I expected to happen that evening, but not that. Not the moment that would split my life into a before and after. Dinner was quiet. The air in the cabin was thick with something unspoken. We both knew what was building between us, but neither of us dared say it aloud. Maybe we hoped the storm outside would carry it away. Maybe we both secretly wanted it to keep us locked inside, together. After we cleared the dishes, Ethan lit the fireplace again and brought out another bottle of wine. I told myself I wouldn't drink much. I needed a clear mind. But the first glass turned into a second. And the second blurred into a third. With each sip, my hesitation melted like snow on skin. We sat on the couch again, closer this time. My legs tucked under me, his knee barely touching mine. We watched the flames dance. I could feel his gaze even when I wasn't looking at him. Every second stretched longer, louder, filled with breath we both held back. Then, without a word, he reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my cheek. I turned to face him, my heart pounding so loudly I thought he could hear it. "Sarah," he said softly, almost pleading. "Tell me to stop." I couldn't. Because I didn't want to. And in that moment, against every promise I'd ever made, against every vow and every reason, I leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't wild or urgent at first. It was soft, careful, like we were both testing whether this was real. But as soon as our lips met, the dam broke. Weeks, no, years of loneliness and unmet needs came rushing out all at once. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Everything we had pushed down, every stolen glance, every held breath, came alive in the dark. Clothes slipped away. Touches grew desperate. Moans swallowed by silence. And in the warm glow of the firelight, I gave in completely. I wish I could say I stopped. That guilt crept in and pulled me back. But I didn't stop. Not once. And afterwards, when we lay tangled in silence, I didn't cry. I didn't feel regret. Not then. I felt alive. For the first time in years, I felt wanted. Desired. Not just physically, but emotionally. Ethan looked at me like I mattered. Like I was more than just a wife, a background character in someone else's life. He held me tightly, whispering things I shouldn't have wanted to hear. "I've wanted this for so long," he breathed into my neck. "You have no idea." And, maybe the worst part of all, was that I didn't want to leave his arms. Not that night. Not yet. The morning after was the quietest morning of my life. I woke up wrapped in a blanket on the couch. Ethan had fallen asleep next to me, his arm draped over my waist. For a few seconds, I let myself stay there, eyes closed, pretending we were just two people without consequences. But reality returned like a cold slap. I carefully pulled away and sat up, covering myself. The fire had gone out. The wine glasses were still on the table. And the guilt, finally, was beginning to settle in. What had I done? I dressed quickly and stepped outside into the morning mist, hoping the cool air would clear my mind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Daniel, good morning, babe. Hope you're enjoying the peace. Call me when you're up." My stomach twisted. I didn't reply. When I walked back inside, Ethan was awake, sitting on the edge of the couch, shirtless and rubbing the back of his neck. "Morning," he said, his voice low and cautious. I nodded, unable to speak. "We should talk," he added. I didn't want to talk. Because if I talked, I'd have to admit what had happened wasn't just a moment of weakness. It had meant something. And admitting that made it worse. Instead, I busied myself with breakfast, barely eating. Ethan kept trying to catch my eye, but I avoided his gaze. It was easier that way. Safer. "I'm not sorry," he finally said. "I know I should be. But I'm not." I froze, spatula in hand. "I've been drawn to you for a long time, Sarah," he continued. "And last night. I know it changes everything. But I don't regret it." His words made it harder to breathe. "I'm married to your brother," I whispered, not turning around. This was wrong. "It's unforgivable." He stood behind me, closer than he should have. "Then why didn't you stop it?" I didn't answer. Because he was right. I could have stopped it. I should have. But I didn't. And that truth haunted me more than anything. We left the cabin in silence, the weight between us too heavy for small talk. The car ride was a blur. Ethan didn't try to touch me again. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. When we got home, Daniel greeted me with a warm hug. He looked tired, stressed from work, but happy to see me. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my forehead. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I was wearing betrayal like perfume. And yet I smiled. Later that night, I lay in bed next to my husband, his arm draped over me just like Ethan's had been. Only this time, it felt different. Distant. Hollow. Ethan and I hadn't just broken a rule. We crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And now, nothing in my life felt real anymore. Everything had changed. Days passed, but my mind stayed in that cabin. I tried to slip back into routine, cooking dinner, folding laundry, asking Daniel about his day like everything was normal. But it wasn't. It never could be again. Not after what I'd done. Not after how it made me feel. Guilt lived inside me like a shadow. It followed me everywhere. I'd catch myself smiling at something Daniel said, only to feel that smile rot the second I remembered Ethan's touch. I stopped initiating conversations. I pulled away from intimacy. I avoided Daniel's gaze during quiet dinners and made excuses to sleep early. But the worst part wasn't just the guilt. It was the craving. I missed Ethan. I hated myself for it, but I missed him. Not just the way he touched me, but the way he looked at me like I mattered. Like I was someone worth holding, not just someone to come home to. Then, one night, as I stood outside on the porch, phone in hand, a message came in. Ethan, I can't stop thinking about you. Please tell me I'm not alone in this. My heart dropped. I should have deleted it. Blocked his number. Thrown the phone across the yard. But instead, I read it again. And again. I didn't reply. But I didn't erase it either. That night, I lay beside Daniel, pretending to be asleep while tears soaked my pillow. I hated what I had become. A woman with a secret. A woman who had broken something sacred. And yet, a woman who, for the first time in years, had felt deeply, painfully alive. The next day, Ethan texted again. Ethan, I'm not trying to ruin your life. I just need to know, did it mean anything to you? It wasn't fair. He was Daniel's brother. He was supposed to be family, safe, distant, off limits. And yet, here we were, caught in a silence that screamed louder than words. I wanted to scream back. Yes, it meant everything. But I didn't send anything. Instead, I sat in the bathroom with the door locked, staring at my reflection, wondering how I got here. How a weekend getaway turned into emotional war. How I was now hiding in my own home, hiding from my choices, my feelings, my truth. Daniel started noticing. The way I flinched at his touch. The way I avoided eye contact. One night, after dinner, he stood in the kitchen and asked quietly, "Is something wrong?" I froze. Shook my head. Forced a smile. Just tired. He didn't press. But I knew he felt the distance. It was growing wider by the day. I was split between two versions of myself, one who hated what I had done, and one who secretly longed to do it again. I had made one mistake. But now, every day that passed without confession, I was making 1,000 more. The silence between Daniel and me had grown into a wall. He didn't say it outright, but I could feel it. He knew something was wrong. His kisses were hesitant now. His touches unsure. The warmth in his eyes had faded, replaced by concern and suspicion. One evening, while I was folding laundry, he stood in the doorway, watching me. His voice was quiet but heavy. "Sarah," he said, "is there someone else?" The words sliced through the air like a blade. I froze, a towel in my hand, heart thudding so loud I thought it might burst through my chest. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My lips parted, but no sound came out. He stepped closer, eyes searching mine. I don't know you lately," he whispered. "You're here, but you're not. I look at you, and you're somewhere else." I looked away. My throat burned. His voice cracked. "Please just tell me the truth. Even if it breaks me. I'd rather hear it from you than feel it in silence." I wanted to confess. I wanted to scream, yes, there was someone else, yes, I messed up, yes, I'm sorry. But no words came. Just tears. He waited. When I didn't answer, he turned and left the room. That silence said more than anything I could have said aloud. Later that night, I found Ethan's name in my phone again. I typed, he asked me if there's someone else. I couldn't answer. I stared at the message for a long time. My finger hovered over the send button. Then I deleted it. No more messages. No more replies. I needed to fix what I could, or walk away from the lies I had built. The next few days were torture. Daniel was distant, quiet, careful around me. He still made coffee in the mornings. Still asked if I needed anything. But his eyes were different now, haunted. He didn't trust me anymore. And I didn't blame him. Meanwhile, Ethan was silent too. No messages. No calls. Just absence. I didn't know if it was guilt, respect, or fear, but his silence made everything worse. It felt like I had burned my entire life down for someone who now refused to look at the flames with me. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the woman I had become. I wasn't a villain. I wasn't a victim either. I was someone who had made a terrible mistake and was now drowning in the weight of pretending it didn't happen. I realized then that silence is also a choice. And sometimes, silence is the loudest confession of all. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The unraveling began in tiny pieces, a missing spark, averted eyes, half-spoken sentences left hanging. And then, finally, Daniel couldn't pretend anymore. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and simply said, "I know you're not in love with me anymore." I stared at my tea, hands trembling. I didn't deny it. How could I? He leaned back, emotion thick in his voice. Did it happen with someone else? My silence answered for me. He nodded slowly, tears pooling in his eyes, but refusing to fall. Was it Ethan? That name. Spoken aloud for the first time. It felt like a gunshot in a quiet room. Again, I said nothing. Daniel stood up, walked away, and didn't come back to bed that night. The next few days blurred into one another. He slept in the guest room. He stopped talking unless necessary. I tried to keep life together, groceries, laundry, bills, but every corner of our home now felt colder. Broken. And then one afternoon, he packed a bag. "I need time," he said quietly. "Away from you. Away from this house. I don't know if I can forgive you." I stood there numb. My voice cracked as I whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." He gave a sad smile. "But you did." He left that night. I didn't hear from Ethan either. Weeks went by with no message, no apology, no explanation. Whatever we had, it died in that cabin the moment it came to life. A fire that burned too bright and too fast. I told myself he was giving me space, respecting the damage we caused. But deep down I knew. He was gone. The thrill, the forbidden rush, it was over. And what was left? A ruined marriage. A home filled with silence. A woman who lost herself chasing a feeling she didn't even fully understand. I thought about reaching out to Ethan one last time, just to ask, did it mean anything? But I never did, because I already knew the answer. It did, but not enough. In time, Daniel and I spoke again. Slowly, carefully. But the damage had been done. Trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. Sometimes it doesn't come back at all. Eventually, we agreed to separate. I moved into a small apartment across town. The silence followed me there, but it felt different now. Heavy, yes, but honest. There was no more pretending. No more lies. Some nights I replay it all, the laughter, the firelight, the kiss that started it all. Would I undo it if I could? Maybe. But part of me knows I would have always wondered what it felt like to be seen, to be wanted, to be touched like that. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not what happened, but what I was willing to risk, just to feel alive.